What's the word, ladies and gentlemen? This is Andrew bringing you some more Dirty Bomb content. Now, in today's episode of Is It Worth It, we'll be talking about the Australian mercenary Red Eye. As you may know, I did a video on this guy some time ago before he was released, and needless to say, now that he is out, there's plenty of more information on him. So, as usual, we'll be going over his stats, weapons, abilities, loadout cards, as well as the general playstyle. All to figure out, is Red Eye worth it? Is he worth the 50,000 credits or $10 USD to unlock? Well, to start us off, Red Eye is a recon, and with 120 health and 400 movement speed, Red Eye has the exact same build as Skyhammer. Now for abilities, he comes with the IR goggles, which allow him to pick up enemy targets that much easier and will even spot them for a short amount of time. And he also comes with a smoke grenade, which will emit a thick cloud of smoke upon activation, just pretty much exactly what it sounds like, guys. Now, his two abilities paired together will allow him to shred enemies pretty effectively, leaving them only guessing where he is. Now, for weapons, Red Eye gets a few, but the one we all know him by is the Grenadier SR. Now, the Grenadier will hit for 40 damage a bullet to the body or 80 damage to the head at a rate of 201 RPM. Now, the magazine size is going to be 12 rounds, which may seem like a lot for a weapon of this caliber, but it has a relatively longer reload of 2.6 seconds. The other two weapons are the Drace or Dryce AR and the PDP-70. I'm not going to go too much into detail for these weapons, but I'll post a general stats here on the screen. Personally, I love the Drace AR for its spammability and respectable damage. I feel like it can hit fire pretty well, allowing me to be pretty aggressive with this weapon. Now the PDP kind of covers the other spectrum, covering long range-ish, maybe even medium range, has excellent damage, decent fire rate. And the Grenadier SR kind of fits in this weird spot in the middle, but it also has pretty heavy recoil. I wouldn't recommend dueling anyone with this weapon either, because the hipfire is pretty god awful if you spam it, and tracking targets with iron sights, at least for me, it's pretty difficult. I'm so used to like scopes or red dot sights or whatever, so I actually wouldn't recommend spamming this gun even if you are aiming down sights, just because of the gun's natural recoil kick. Honestly, for me personally, at first the gun was a real challenge to use. I ended up trying out the Drace and the PDP with much more success, but then going back again to the Grenadier for a bit, I figured out the gun's strong points, which is pretty much medium range. It seems as though if you try to go CQC with the Grenadier, and even if you land a headshot, it isn't the most consistent thing to rely on, especially if you're trying to hit fire with it. The Grenadier also seems to not be as good far out in the distance, as you don't really have a scope to magnify those targets. Now, with all that said, yes, you can hit fire this gun. I'm not saying it's impossible to hit fire with the Grenadier, but if you do, I would recommend turning on full crosshairs if you're doing this, because that way you can see when the bloom resets to take your next hip fire shot. I guess the TLDR version of all of this is that yes, the Grenadier does offer some decent damage, but you really have to sit down and kind of learn the gun's recoil habits as well as cone of fire bloom. Again, all of this is kind of based off of my personal observations on what seemed to be like the most effective for me. But all in all, what I like about Red Eye is that all of its primaries, they're all pretty viable. It just all depends on what you like to do and how you like to play Red Eye. Now, the secondaries, they're not nearly as exciting. You get the usual selection of semi-auto pistols, the Calden DE50, and the M9. Personally, I like the M9 just because it has the 50 rounds it gets per magazine, as opposed to the 7 rounds in the other two pistols. But, at the end of the day, they all do the same job, which is act as finisher weapons. Now, for his melee weapons, he gets the Stiletto, the Beckel, and a new knife called the Kukri. Now, the Kukri is supposed to be somewhat of like an in-between for the regular knives and the katana. With some testing, I saw that it does 55 damage in a slash, and the lunge will hit for about 85 damage. Remember, these are numbers for the Kukri currently, so if they end up changing it in the future for the damage, I will note it in the description. Now, for augments, I feel like a lot of Red Eye's choices aren't that great. I kind of wish Red Eye had some sort of unique augment to him, you know, maybe something that increases the smoke duration or the smoke size by 15%, you know, just something new or interesting, but instead we get pretty generic augments. But out of all of them, I would say the ones to look out for would be Guardian Angel, Bomb Squad, and Drilled. Loadouts that I would recommend, not that any of them are like outstandingly perfect. I would say the G75, the D75, and the P75, you know, all of those are pretty decent. They all feature the best augment and weapon combinations. Now for playstyle, Red Eye is generally going to stay at range. I wouldn't recommend you run up to enemies in CQC with this Grandier SR and try to blast them in the face. You know, if you want to play super aggressive, the Dryce AR will make you as competitive as you can get in CQC. If you prefer medium or long range, I would recommend either the PDP-70 or the Grandier. Although I would have to say the PDP is probably a lot easier to use if you like aiming down sights a lot. The Grandier will have similar damage to the PDP, but offers slightly higher RPM and better hipfire, granted you know how to use it. The next thing is use your smoke wisely. Remember, friendlies can't see through that stuff. You know, luckily for you, you can spawn tag enemies if you look at them through the IR goggles, but also please remember that explosions will get rid of your smoke, such as Skyhammer's airstrike. One thing that I personally noticed was that I would at times depend too much on the smoke and not realize that the enemy can see me. You know, the cloud isn't that big, so make sure that you're aware of the cover it's providing at all times, or you just end up being exposed in this weird position for easy pickings. All in all, Red Eye is a fun mercenary to play, I would say. Is he worth it? Well, you know, I think it all boils down to playstyle. While I don't regret my purchase at all, there have definitely been times where I've been playing Red Eye and I was just like, man, his playstyle just isn't for me. I'm not a huge fan of like the semi-automatic weapons, and I tend to like to stay at closer ranges and be a bit more aggressive. However, I could see that if you enjoy keeping your targets at a far or fair distance and enjoy rifles like the Dryce, you know, Red Eye may just be the Merc for you. Also, if you are set on use the Grandier SR on Red Eye, be ready for a bit of a learning curve, as the weapon is a bit harder to handle than the Dryce, or Dryce, however you want to pronounce that, and the PDP. But once you get the hang of it and master its recoil and that cone of fire bloom and how to time your hipfire shots, it is also quite viable. Anyways guys, I hope this video helped you in deciding whether or not you should purchase Red Eye. Definitely a fun mercenary to use, but he requires a playstyle that may not suit everyone, myself included. Personally, I don't see myself using Red Eye all the time, but I'll acknowledge he's pretty fun to play, you know, and he's a solid mercenary in the right hands. So, anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Let's shoot for 50 likes on this bad boy. And if you're new to the channel and this is the first video you are seeing, be sure to check out some of my other videos on my channel. I do tons and tons of Dirty Bomb content. If you like this one, I'm pretty sure you'll like some of my other ones. And with all that said and done, I think I'm just about finishing up here. So, until next time guys, I'll see you around.